Hey guys, this is Vernier for cardrunner.com, bringing you the 10th and final episode of Building Good Poker Study Habits, 10 Steps to More Mindful Poker. So in this 10th and final episode, we're going to analyze 5 or more hands where you play the turn in the river, heads up in position in a single race pot without initiative. So this is the flip side to what we did in step number 9, where we had initiative but did not have position. And an overwhelming majority of hands that you play are going to be heads up and in single raised pots. So we're looking at in position play without initiative and out of position play with initiative. So let's take a look at the filters. And this is actually from last week. So here is what I would change. Pre-flop PFR, we're going to change that to false since we are not going to have initiative. And did 3-bet, false. Last act on flop, that's going to change to true. Players on the flop is still 2. Saw river true. Saw turn true. Face pre-flop 3-bet is false. We want our pots to be single raised pots. And everything else looks good. So let's take a look. Looks like 196 hands. And let's get a quick look at the results graph. Looks pretty good. And let's look at showdown winnings. So relatively flat. Okay, let's take a look at the hands and let's analyze them. So we'll just start at the top and go from there. Pocket tens. Looks like I don't have any hands on the player, but versus a early position raise, it's a fairly standard call on the button. And he checks, which is weird. I'm not sure why somebody would check there. Usually it's for pot control, but it's just such a common spot to be continuation betting. Either way, I'm going to bet and try to get value. The turn is a king. He could certainly be doing that with ace-king. His check on this flop just kind of confuses me. It goes check-check. I don't see a lot of value in betting the turn. And the river's a jack, which is a pretty bad card for me. And he bets quite large, and I think at this point it's a fairly straightforward fold. I only beat a bluff. And this would be a very kind of like backwards convoluted bluff. So I think his frequency of bluffing here is going to be small. So I like betting the flop. I like checking the turn, and I like folding the river. So that's what I did, and that's the hand. Kind of curious to see why I called here pre-flop. Let's find out. I call in position. I'm not crazy about this. I think that this is marginal at best, probably a fold against some players. This should be a fold more often than not. So he checks, and I check behind. I think if he checks here, I should stab once and go from there. He checks again. I just don't like the way I play the hand. So I think if he checks on that flop, I should fire. Queen 10 suited versus Ivy Jeffrey, who, again, is one of my friends and definitely a very strong player. Flop comes, gives me top pair. He checks. I bet. He calls. Turn is a king. He checks. I bet again. I like my bet here. And he ends up folding. So, again, I'm not sure what kind of hand he check calls there, but definitely a bet on the flop and definitely a bet on the turn. He could have a weaker 10. He could have a hand like 8s or 9s. Although I'm not sure why he would check call 8s or 9s. He might just have complete air. And, although a complete air, I think he's going to bet. So, again, I'm not sure what he's check calling the flop and then check folding the turn other than a hand. Maybe even a hand like 5s that just doesn't want to bet the flop. All right, moving right along. pot sized open from the cutoff with 7/8 suited. I think here, I think 3-betting this sometimes, calling sometimes. I don't think there's a lot of value in folding 400 big blinds in position. So I flopped a gut shot and backdoor spades. I don't like raising here. By raising, I don't really represent anything. And I want to realize my equity with 2 cards to come. Turn is a 2. He fires quite big again, and at this point, I don't pick up any additional equity, so I'm just going to fold. So I like calling on the flop, and the turn is definitely a fold. The pre-flop is the thing that I'm least sure about, simply because I don't know. I'm not sure if 3-betting or folding or calling is the best play. I think calling is fine. I mean, I'm in position. I've got a hand that plays well in position. Let's just see a flop. Jacks. Versus a short stacker, this should be a 3-bet. Checks. I don't know why I check behind here. I mean, this should just be a... Once he checks, I should fire. He checks again, I bet, and he folds. No idea why I didn't bet that flop, but I think it's a mandatory bet. Because if he has like Queen X or Ace X, I'm just giving him free equity. Even if he has a hand like Pocket Fives and doesn't want to c-bet, why would I let him draw and try to... I mean, if he has Pocket Fives and he has no intention of c-betting this flop or continuing, then he's only going to continue when he makes his hand, his 2 outs. So I think not betting here is a not betting this flop is it's a pretty big mistake, and I think pre-flop I should just 3-bet this. Let me look at this king-queen hand. Looks like I lost a substantial pot there. This deep with king-queen offsuit. Let me look at how this player's... So how he responds to... So he folds to a lot of 3-bets. So by flatting here, I'm keeping a lot of his dominated kings and queens in. And I think if I was to 3-bet, then he would continue with a lot of better kings and queens. And yeah, I think calling here is fine. There's some reasons, there's some merit to 3-betting at times, but he just folds a lot to 3-bets, which means he's going to continue with a stronger range. So I just think there's going to be more value by flatting here, especially in position against this player. He bets, I called. I don't see any reason to raise this flop. Turn is a 3. He bets small again, which is kind of weird. I like raising here just to... I like raising here in order to charge him for draws and build a pot. He flats, and the river's a 2. He checks. So now I'm fairly confident that I have the best hand. I think his most likely holding here is some kind of an ace. Ace Jack, Ace 10, maybe a combo draw like a King Jack, but I'm just going to bet my 2 pair for value. And I think I should bet bigger. I think I should bet about half pot, but then he min-raises, which is kind of crappy, but I only need 13% equity to continue. So I call, because that's just what I do in this spot. And he had top 2. So calling pre-flop I think is fine. Calling the flop I think is fairly standard, just because I would call with a fairly wide range on this flop. A lot of hands like Queen Jack, King Jack, Ace Jack, etc. When he leads so weakly on the turn, let's get back to the turn. He leads so weakly. There's just, I want to raise and charge draws. And I think on the river, I should bet bigger there. I should bet something like 25 bucks, and then if he raises, it's just going to be a fold. Looks like that's just not a very interesting hand. Let's take a look at this queen 9. Blind on blind. I think this is going to be good enough to defend in position. Flop a queen, call. He leads again. No idea why I folded. I should call here at least one more time. He could still be value betting 8s or 9s or 10s or jacks. He could be value betting all kinds of draws. In position, this is a call again. So I don't like, if I'm going to be defending a hand like queen 9, it certainly should not be to fold on this turn. Let me look at his c-bet stats. I actually still don't have those, so I should get my Hold'em manager set up to have those stats. All right. Next hand. Fairly standard call on the button versus a early position raise. Definitely calling this flop, calling the turn, and I'm going to call the river. No, I'm not. Looks like I ended up folding the river. It looks like he is his bet sizing. So he bets the flop and he bets half pot, which I think he can do with a pretty wide range. On the turn, he bets less than half pot. And again, I think he can still continue doing that with a hand like 9s. The problem is, I don't think he'll do it with a hand like 7s. And so I basically beat 9s. Obviously, he can still do that with a turn flush draw. And the river's just a blank. And I think here I should... So I need to be good 24% of the time. And the question is, does he triple barrel a bluff that he missed, or does he triple barrel worse? Well, the only worst hand that I can see here is something like pocket 9s. I think if I had a jack, this would be a fairly easy call because he could have 9s and 10s. But him betting 3 streets there, I guess on the river, I mean, I just didn't feel like I was good, good enough often enough, just because I expect him to check a lot of rivers because it looks like I have a jack and I'm calling down. So I don't know. This is clearly I'm still not certain what to do on this river, and this is a good hand for me to go back and try to figure out, ask some better players than me what they think about this. The problem with this on the river is just there's only one hand that I beat, which is pocket 9s, that he could legitimately bet for value. Everything else beats me, and he can have a lot of those hands. So I think that's the reason why I folded. Sets are nice. Looks like I hit a set here. So pretty standard call with pocket 7s. And super drivey flop, p-bets. This is a spot where I'm going to raise because I could be raising with a really wide range there. A lot of draws just to try to take the hand down. So he ends up calling. The turn is a jack. And I think I should just continue betting there. I think that he could certainly have a flush, but he could have a lot of worse hands as well. And the river pairs the board. He bets 9. I make it 39, and he calls. And he ended up having pocket aces. So the reason I like betting the turn is because he can have a lot of overpairs with the heart, which are not going to fold. And he could have a flush, but against the flush, I still have a redraw. So I played the turn fairly passively, and I should not have gotten paid off by him bet calling that river. So I think I should bet the turn there. All right. Let's skip this hand where I just ended up checking 3 streets. And let's look at, actually, let me take a look at, see if there's another big hand. We'll make that the last one. So it looks like I'm just winning a lot of kind of small pots, and it looks like I am winning a lot, which is great. I end up bet folding here, probably because I was confused. Let's take a look at this hand. So I call in position against the hammer, who is a fairly solid regular. This is a pretty marginal call. I think I would prefer 3-betting this. So, great flop for me. He bets, and I call. I think this is a spot where I could raise and comfortably get it in. I decide to play more passively. I think by default, I play more passively in position. But I think just on sheer equity here, I think raising here is fine. Worst case scenario here is he has a hand like ace queen. I think against kings and aces I'm in very good shape. Against flush draws I'm in very good shape. Against ace queen I'm not doing so hot. Although I still have tons of equity. So I think there's a lot of merit to raising here. Turn is a 3, and I call again. At this point, once he fires again on the turn, I think he has a legitimate hand. I think he's got a pretty strong hand. And the river is a great card for me. He checks, and I pot it, and he ends up calling, and he ended up having kings. So against kings, I was doing great. The reason I end up potting the river is because it makes it look like I have a missed flush draw. So, and like I'm just trying to buy it. I think this is a good spot for an overbet. I think I can bet something like 60, just because I think he would call. So the turn, I think I played fine. I don't like raising the turn. The flop, I think there's merits to raising on sheer equity. And the river, I think, is a great spot for an overbet, and I did not do that. I hope this series has been helpful. I hope that it gave you some tools and some focus on things that you can do yourself to study your game and methodically improve it and look for patterns. As you can see, one of the things from today's video, I just played a lot of hands very passively in position. And I think there's merits to doing that in position, but it also doesn't put much pressure on your opponents, and you should be putting pressure on your opponents in position. Good luck at the tables. Until next time, this has been Vernier for cardrunners.com.